Good morning and welcome to the Daily Aus. It's Monday the 27th of April. I'm Zara Seidler.
I'm Billi FitzSimons.
Late last week, Mark Butler announced major changes to the NDIS, Australia's National Disability Insurance Scheme. Those changes were in an attempt to cut rising costs. Under the changes, every single person on the scheme will be reassessed from 2028 with a view to moving people with lower needs to other supports. In today's podcast, we're going to explain the context behind the government's decision, the changes themselves, and what the response to these changes have actually been.
Zara, this was a huge announcement from the government last week that they are going to be cutting some of the resources to the NDIS. Before we get to exactly what that announcement was, I think for anyone unfamiliar, we should explain what the NDIS is. Like you said, it's the National Disability Insurance Scheme. What does that mean?
Yeah, it is a good starting point. I also do want to talk through the numbers because I think that paints a picture as to why this is such a big national conversation. So the NDIS, as you said, National Disability Insurance Scheme, it provides support and services for Australians with disability. Now, what those services and supports actually look like can vary from person to person, whoever is on this scheme, but it includes things like access to community services like doctors and assistance for necessary support. So think of something like a car modification, for example. Now, the NDIS was launched in 2013, and when it was set up, it was intended to support 410,000 people.
Sorry, how many?
410,000. So just under 500,000. That was when it was created in 2013. They said that at the peak, it will serve 410,000 people.
What I find interesting about that is I remember learning the stat that there are 5.5 million Australians who have a disability. So that's a big disparity between how many people this is available to compared to how many people in Australia live with a disability.
Well, that number hasn't actually rung true in terms of how many people are actually on the scheme itself. That's what they intended for it to be.
Right.
Because I think when they set it up, it was intended to be for a specific cohort of people. The number it's actually at right now is 760,000. So that number has gone from a 410,000 to 760,000. Now, obviously, that costs money. That costs taxpayer money. So at its peak, the NDIS was projected to cost about $13.5 billion. So at that first number that we just said, now in this financial year, it's set to cost over $50 billion.
Wow.
Which is quite a jump from the projections. And those projections were set by the Productivity Commission, more than 10 years ago now. So there's nothing to say that those were always going to be right, but that's what the government keeps highlighting in terms of when they say there's been a blowout or this has cost way more than intended. Those are the sorts of numbers that they're talking about. Now, in terms of painting a picture as to who is on the NDIS, because you just referred there to the number of people with disability in Australia. So under 25s represent more than 60% of active NDIS participants. So a lot of young people are on the NDIS. Around 22% of recipients are between the ages of 0 to 8 years old. And the most common primary disability of NDIS is autism. That makes up nearly half of the people accessing this scheme. The other most common primary disabilities are an intellectual disability and developmental delays. So those are the people currently who are accessing the NDIS at present.
It's a huge range of people who access NDIS. And I know for a lot of people it has been life-changing. Their ability to access the services that the NDIS does subsidise. But like you said, there have been issues about how much the cost of it has blown out. And that was at the centre of what the Health Minister Mark Butler announced last week.
Yeah.
What was that announcement exactly?
Yeah, so we had Mark Butler, he's the NDIS Minister.
I don't think he is. I think he's the Health Minister, and
I think he's also the NDIS.
Jenny McAllister. Because I was interested last week.
Wait, I'm Googling this. Oh, you're right.
It's Jenny McAllister that's the NDIS Minister. And that's why I found it interesting that the Health Minister and not the NDIS Minister was announcing this.
Well, that is very interesting.
Yes.
Okay, well, Mark Butler, Health Minister.
Yes.
He got up, he spoke at the National Press Club. We had known for quite a while that there was something brewing. Even when the Prime Minister came in, that announcement hadn't been made yet, but we knew there was something coming. And so this speech had a few elements to it. The first was to show and tell the Australian public why the government thinks there is an issue and what that issue actually is. And then the second half of it was, and here's what we're going to do about it.
Right.
So to the issue that the government has identified, Mark Butler claimed in his speech that there is a lot of fraud within the NDIS. And he is talking here not about people who are with disability accessing the NDIS. He's actually talking about people who are actively choosing to use this as a fraud scheme. I'm going to let Mark Butler explain.
Part of the challenge that we face is that the NDIS has become a soft target for shonks and Rortas, as well as the worst elements of organised crime. I want to be very clear about this. When we talk about fraud in the NDIS, we're not talking about people with disability. We're not talking about families who've been put on a plan and offered support. They're not doing anything wrong. The fraud in the NDIS is being perpetrated by lowlifes who are scamming both the taxpayer, but more importantly, people with a disability.
So he's talking there about the people who are providing the service to people with a disability. So, for example, if you're a home carer, he's saying that there are people taking advantage of the scheme who are taking money from the NDIS without actually helping people with a disability.
That's one example. He called it shonks and rorts. So he's using like quite deliberate language here of people who are intentionally doing this. And he said fraud prevention efforts have failed because of the design of the scheme itself. So taking some responsibility there for the fact that the design, according to Mark Butler, is the problem here. It's easy for people to take advantage of the NDIS, and that's accounted for why these costs have blown out so much. That's according to the government. He reiterated the government's concerns around the growing cost of the NDIS, and he said he wants to make sure it's sustainable now and for future generations, and that's why he announced what he did.
Hey, I'm Sam. I'm the co-founder of TDA. With one button, 82% of you who aren't subscribed to this YouTube channel can change that and help Australian media. Click subscribe. Now back to the video.
Okay, Zara, so you've outlined what the issue is.
Yeah.
Now let's get to what the government has said they're doing about it.
Yeah. So the headline that I think everyone would have seen is that every single person who accesses the NDIS is going to be reassessed. What that means is that if you have been on the NDIS for 10 years or, 5 years, from 2028, that's when the process is going to start, you are going to be reassessed to see if it's still necessary for you to be accessing those services. If you aren't deemed to be needing those services, they are going to take you off the NDIS. And what we heard from the government is that those with lower needs are going to be moved to other supports. I'm directly quoting there. So we're going to see a lot of people removed from the services that they have been getting provided for however long, in an attempt to bring down that number, the number of participants who are actually accessing it.
And just to clarify, because I think I might have confused us before, they're not saying that the only issue is with the people providing the services on the NDIS. They are saying that there could also be issues with people accessing the NDIS as people who are living with a disability?
Well, they're saying that too many people are accessing at present. Remember when I spoke through the projections of how much it was going to cost and how many people? Basically, that has become a financial problem for the government. They are now needing to reduce the number by 160,000 people by 2030.
I thought that was just because they misjudged how many people living with a disability would need help, not because they believe...
They believe some people who are currently accessing it should not be accessing it in the future. And that's why they are reassessing every single person. They're not reassessing certain cohorts. It's every one of those 760,000 people, which is going to be a lot of work for the government. All of them are being reassessed.
Are they also reassessing every person providing help on the NDIS, like the people providing the services?
They're not going to be reassessed, these providers, but there are going to be stricter mandatory reporting guidelines around ensuring that there isn't this fraudulent activity. So it's more of a crackdown on the fraudulent side there, but it's more about bringing down the numbers for the actual NDIS participants.
Right.
And so that is one part. So I said we're going to go down from about 760,000 to 600,000 by 2030. So this isn't happening tomorrow by any means. It's over the next couple of years. That's one thing. Another thing that the government announced is that every year spending increases for the NDIS, usually in line with inflation or, just with the natural kind of curves of the economy. They've announced that they're going to restrict that year-on-year increase to just 2%. So people listening will be familiar with the fact that inflation is above 2%, but they're restricting the cost and the spend of the government by just 2%.
Wow, so they're really tightening the budget here.
They are a lot. And the last thing that they're doing is they are going to limit the average amount that the government wants to allow recipients to spend on accessing social and community participation activities. So that will be limited to $26,000, which is in line with what the spending for that was in 2023, some 3 years ago.
What has the opposition said?
It's interesting because this idea of the NDIS being blown out, and blown out is just language that we've heard time and time again. People do take issue with that language, but it's certainly what we hear from the government of the day, but it's also what we've heard from the Liberal Party for a very long time. So Shadow NDIS Minister Melissa McIntosh said the opposition wanted to help the government reduce fraud, but she was very concerned about some of the other proposals, like that reassessment policy that we said that everyone's going to be reassessed. McIntosh pointed out an example of someone. She said a woman had told her that she needed to prove to the NDIS that she did not have legs. She then said, does this mean that she has to reprove that she no longer has legs still in a couple of years' time to get the funding that she desperately needs? So there, I guess, in a broad sense, the government and the coalition are aligned in that something needs to be done, but the coalition is perhaps pointing out a few flaws that they deem with the government's proposal there. Then we have the Greens. They were extremely critical of the announcement. We have Green Senator Jordan Steele-John, who uses a wheelchair. He called the speech, frankly, terrifying. He specifically called out those cuts to social and community participation. He said those supports enable disabled people to spend some time outside in the community, sometimes an hour a week, and now those supports are on the chopping block. And that was one of those changes that I announced earlier.
You also spoke to Bianca Stone, who is the head of Impact at All Things Equal, which is a Melbourne-based social enterprise empowering people with disability.
Yeah, she's been on this podcast before, actually.
She has?
Yeah.
What did she tell you?
I'm going to play a little grab from B because as an employer of people with disability, I thought she had quite a unique perspective on this.
I feel really strongly that fraudulent providers and poor practice should be removed from the NDIS because that behaviour just undermines the integrity of the entire scheme. But at the same time, though, it's important to acknowledge a lot of the shortfalls of this reform. In my case, through my work at All Things Equal, I see just how important it is for people with disability to be supported, to be active participants and contributors to society and their local communities. So if we begin to step back from funding that access, even if it's incrementally, what we're signalling is that this kind of participation is not essential, and that has real implications for how people with disability are valued in our society. And from my end, that's just not good enough.
All right, so some very strong feelings there. What happens now? I mean, you said that this comes into effect in a couple of years. What happens between now and then?
Comes into effect if certain elements pass Parliament. So this can't just be done unilaterally. The government has said that they will introduce legislation when Parliament resumes, so next time they're sitting. It's interesting what will happen with the coalition, whether they will support this or they won't. We know that for these pieces of legislation, the government does need, especially in the Senate, the support of the coalition, the Greens or independents. Who will give them that support to actually pass this? Well, be a matter of waiting and seeing. But this is certainly a top priority, and they've said that this will be the top priority at the next sitting Parliament.
If I were to make a prediction, I would say that the coalition is going to support this.
I think so. I think given how much they have spoken about this issue, it would be quite a big move not to support it. I can't see the Greens supporting this.
No.
And independents, can't really talk about them as a cohort. They all vote very differently. So I think that the government would be relying on the coalition for this one.
All right, Zara, thank you for taking us through that.
Thank you. Oh, we have a tidbit.
We have a tidbit.
It is a public holiday here in Sydney today. It's not a public holiday all over the country.
No, because Anzac Day fell on the Saturday.
Exactly. And we're not often the ones that get the public holidays.
No, we have
Victoria, you guys, this is payback. You always get them.
Yeah.
Anyway, not my tidbit. My tidbit was about Anzac biscuits because we
I actually have beef with you.
Oh.
Because you have brought Anzac biscuits into this office.
I have done no such thing. My co-founder has. You
Your
think I'm not
co-founder-
generous?
Yeah. There have been too many Anzac biscuits
Every
in this
day.
office every day last week.
But they're also getting like progressively more stale.
No, I
And like
find
now
that-
they're crunchy and I don't want them to be crunchy. I want them to be soft. But wait, I'm just going to cut you off so that I can
Yes.
actually say my tidbit, which is that there are restrictions around Anzac biscuits. Did you know that?
No.
Okay,
What are the restrictions?
When I say that, what do you think?
Maybe it rings a rough bell. Is it that you can only sell it on Anzac Day?
No, that's
That would be
two
silly.
Up. That's
Oh,
two
that's
up
two
that you can
up.
only do on. But fair. No, Anzac biscuits. There is basically a very strict guideline on what constitutes an Anzac biscuit. And you'll notice I'm not saying Anzac cookies because that doesn't count. They have to be called Anzac biscuits.
Why?
The Department of Veteran Affairs has specific guidelines.
Department of Veteran Affairs?
Yeah, around what constitutes an Anzac biscuit. You can't put chocolate in it. Doesn't count. Bad news for me.
That would be tasty.
I love chocolate. I know. Well, it doesn't count. That's just like a chewy biscuit with a bit of chocolate in it. Anyway, so there are all of these restrictions around like the ingredients and the name. And that's, I guess, to uphold the sanctity of the Anzac biscuit.
And so the sanctity of those Anzac biscuits should be upheld.
They are very yummy, only when they're chewy though, I must say.
Well, the good thing is that they are now all on sale. So
Correct.
I shall be going
For the rest of the year.
Yes. So we will be having Anzac biscuits in the office for the rest of the
Love a sale.
week. That is all we have time for. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Daily Aus. If you can press 5 stars on Spotify or Apple, it really helps new audiences find us. We'll be back tomorrow with another deep dive, but until then, we hope you have a great day.